Hey everyone, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. This video is intended for students in my Anatomy and Physiology course. You can see here our laboratory guide, or what I call the list of things to know for our Part 2 course. It's written for students at Del Mar College, and these are the structures you're going to be responsible for your lab exams. They're all in this little laboratory guide. We're going to be starting on page 4. If you look at page 4, there's a whole bunch of slides at the top. We're going to be starting at the bottom of page 4 where it says anatomy of the eye. So I'm going to have two models that I'm going to show you. One is the eyeball not in the orbit. One is in the orbit. I'm going to start with the one in the orbit. Okay, so if you start on the bottom of page 4, you'll notice the term palpebral. Palpebral means eyelids. So palpebra would be singular. This is the superior palpebra. This is the inferior palpebra. You see the two eyelids here. Where the eyelids meet at each edge, there's a little fold or little crease right here called the lateral canthus on this eye and the medial canthus, because the nose would be over here, so this would be medial. And then this pink structure at the medial canthus, and the medial canthus is right where they meet, but this pink structure here is called the lacrimal caruncle. Okay? Now, there's a muscle that raises the superior eyelid. This muscle here, these red lines represent a muscle called the levator palpebrae superioris. Now I'm going to go over the lacrimal structure. We're not going to cover the palpebral conjunctiva or the ocular conjunctiva on your list. They're not on the model, or even if I tried to show them to you, we couldn't find them. So don't worry about those. Okay, but on page 5, what you'll find is the lacrimal structure. This is where our tears are made and the flow of tears. This structure up here was called the lacrimal gland. You see two lobes of the lacrimal gland as it's kind of folded behind the eyelid here. These little channels would be called the lacrimal ducts, and tears would be made in the lacrimal gland, secreted through the duct, and cover the surface of the eye. When they meet, when tears get wicked over here, they'll drain through this little opening. And I have a second version of this so I can show it to you, but if I look, there's two openings. There's a punctum here and a punctum there, like someone punctured it. Those little holes allow tears to drain, and they're called a lacrimal punctum. Okay, so the little black dot is the lacrimal punctum. As the tears drain, they're going to drain through this tube and this tube here. You'll see a pair of these tubes. Those are called lacrimal canaliculi. So lacrimal canaliculus would be single, and so this is a lacrimal canaliculus. As the tears drain, they're collected here in this structure. This pink structure here is called the lacrimal sac. And at the base of the lacrimal sac, there's an opening here. And this opening is called the nasolacrimal duct. Okay? And that's where your tears will drain into your sinus passageways. Now, I'm going to cover the 6 extraocular muscles of the eyeball. I'm going to start on the other model, and then I'll come back to this one. So let me set this one aside. So now, on this model, you can see the white part of the eye is a structure called the sclera. It's part of our fibrous tunic, and we've talked about it in lecture, but this is all sclera. All of the eye out here is sclera. This clear part, and you can see the reflection of light, this clear part of the fibrous tunic is called the cornea. And where the two meet, this little edge all the way around is called the corneal limbus. If I look through the sclera, I can see the part of the eye that gives the eyeball its color. So I'm going to take this off for a second. This structure inside the eye would be called the iris. And the lines in the iris represent a muscle called the pupillary dilator muscle. There's a hole in the iris, this opening here, which is called the pupil. We'll come back to that again in a little bit. Now, the extraocular muscles, there are 6 of them. There's one on top of the eyeball here. This is called the superior rectus because it runs straight back. If I set it down, since this is the right eyeball, then this one over here is going to be called the medial rectus, and I can tell you how I know this is the right eyeball in a second. If I come over here on the outside, this muscle would be called the lateral rectus. So superior rectus, medial rectus, and lateral rectus. If I rotate the eyeball up, actually, you got to kind of look at it from behind or on the side. There's another muscle down here called the inferior rectus. So since I'm looking at the eye from a medial view, that's superior rectus, medial rectus, and the inferior rectus. Now, this little white piece is a tendon that connects to a muscle called the superior oblique. So we're seeing the attachment of the superior oblique here. And if I rotate the eye and look underneath, there's another muscle that attaches from underneath. This is the inferior oblique muscle. They're a little bit hard to see here. By the way, that's the optic nerve. So I'm going to show them to you on the eyeball that is in the orbit. So let me move this model over. If I look at the model that's in the orbit and I turn it sideways, I can see several structures here. Number one, this is still your lacrimal gland. This muscle on top right here that attaches to the eyelid is called the levator palpebri superioris. But notice there's a second muscle here underneath it, and this muscle connects directly to the eyeball. So I'm going to remove this and let you see that this muscle is not the same as this one. This is your levator palpebri superioris. This one's called the superior rectus. It runs straight back here. This would be your lateral rectus. In order to see the other muscles, it's easier if I take these muscles off. This muscle running here up against the medial wall is called the medial rectus. This is your optic nerve. And there's the inferior rectus. Now, I'm going to slide this a little closer and tilt it a little bit. Actually, I'm going to turn it. This muscle that hugs underneath the eyeball is called the inferior oblique because it comes in at an angle, and oblique means angle. And this muscle up here will run along the medial wall, but it loops through a piece of connective tissue called the trochlea and attaches to the eyeball by this little tendon. We call that the superior oblique muscle. I'm going to rotate a little bit more. Superior oblique, superior rectus, medial rectus, inferior rectus, lateral rectus, inferior oblique down there. I hope you can see that. My hand got in the way. Right? On this model, you can see the sclera, the outer covering of the eye. And you can see the cornea here, which is detachable on this model. And then behind the cornea is the iris with the pupillary dilator muscle and the pupil, the hole there. So, now I'm going to go and cover a few more structures on this model. I'm going to open up this eyeball. I'm actually going to switch to this other one because it's much larger and you can see the structures better. So let me set this out of our way. Sorry for that high-pitched sound. When I open up the eyeball, deep to the cornea, we see the iris and pupil. This outer covering would be sclera, but this layer is the choroid coat or the choroid. Now, if I take the model out, or this part out of the model, I can see the choroid here. I can see the optic nerve, and I can see the iris and pupil. If I break this model open, there's a globe, a clear globe that will come out, and this structure is called the, sorry, it fell apart on me. This structure is called the vitreous body. This whole globe of clear stuff is called the vitreous body, and it fills the entire posterior cavity. Now, if I take the eyeball and look at it from the inside, this pink layer or flesh-colored layer is called the retina. This is your choroid. This is the retina. On the retina, we can see a couple of things that are of note. This white spot is called the optic disc. That's where the optic nerve actually attaches the retina. And we see all these blood vessels fanning out. And then this yellow spot is called the fovea. Sorry, the glare is getting us. But this yellow spot is called the fovea centralis, or the fovea. So, optic disc, fovea, retina. Now, if I look inside the front of the eye, so if I were looking out of the eye this way, the retina continues only up to a certain point. Where the retina stops, sandwiched between the choroid and the retina is a dark layer called the pigmented epithelium, and I see that here continuing on once the retina stops. If you look carefully, you see that the edge of the retina is very serrated or has teeth. That edge of the retina is called the ora serrata. All the way around, you see it goes all the way around. That's the ora serrata, that little serrated edge. I have my thumb on this to keep the lens from falling out. So this would represent your lens. If I take the lens out, this would be the back of the pupil. I'm sorry, the back of the iris. The hole is the pupil. The back of the iris is also coated with this pigmented epithelium. And then these white lines represent a muscle called the ciliary muscle. Okay? That's your ciliary muscle. So now, I hope that covers everything for these two models. We're going to do another model of the eye where we look at some stuff from a mid-sagittal view. Thanks for watching.